So welcome everybody. Welcome back to the podcast series of Best Practice Network, Talking Leadership. We've got a great topic today and two great speakers, presenters, and panel chat hosts with us today. So looking forward to the one. So our real topic is going to be the changing role of HR. And this is something that's really come about with a number of discussions that I've been having with a group of my members. I've been traveling around the last few weeks in Queensland, New South Wales. And I know it's a topic around the whole of the network, Australia and New Zealand, and which, as you know, includes Vietnam and Sri Lanka as well. So Eric, welcome back. It's been a while, but looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, mate, thanks for having me back. Yeah, look forward to it very much so.
So what I'd like to do now is welcome a person that I know on Network definitely will have seen and heard and been involved with before. So Cheryl Jekiel. So hello, Cheryl. How are you?
Hello, doing well.
That's what we got to say. So Cheryl is over in the US. So it's last night for us. So it's obviously the morning for us. So for those of you who haven't been aware, Cheryl has run a number of workshops in Australia for us. And we also work with Cheryl as part of our study tour, a Canadian study tour. And we have a great group going to the AME Dallas conference in October. So looking forward to catching up there. Cheryl, after 3 years it would have been now. So looking forward to getting back. Our other panelist today is Catherine Dawson of AI Group. So Catherine, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Kevin, how are you?
No, we're very good and looking forward to your input as well. So Catherine, just very briefly, just to give some context, what's your role within AI Group and what's your focus at the moment?
My role at AI Group is managing the HR consulting practice. So that's been in existence for about 3 years now. So we're building a practice there, a community of practice really. AI Group is a representative of employers across Australia. So it's the voice of industry, one of the voices of industry, I should say. And so my role is to, I do fee for service to our membership. It's a subscription-based organisation. And that's what I do.
And Cheryl, I know some of our members will be aware of you and looking forward to having you back in Australia as well. But I think it'd help to appreciate, just to give people a position yourself on the work you have been doing and where your focus is at the moment.
So I've been doing more people value stream work in the last 2 years in terms of my area of thought leadership, which is mostly been focused on how can we better understand how people flow, how people operate, what they need, how they're wired, and best meet their needs. And if we could better meet the needs of people, it would help everything else. So things like the Great Resignation it's been kind of, it merged together. We were doing it because we think it's the best way to treat people, but it has ended up to be the main topic of the day, so to speak, which is We need to get better at how we support people.
Yeah, no, excellent. And I think there's, and we're going to talk about some key trends at the moment. So there's a terminology, which again, I'd be interested if anyone's picked up at the moment, that is now, we've had the Great Resignation and the Great Vacation and a number of other greats. The one we're hearing at the minute is the Great Reset. So a complete reset in terms of how we do think, operate, and on a personal life and the professional life as well. So I think it's been quite interesting of where those key themes have come from. And I know, Cheryl, you in terms of our members, you have a real focus about the lean and the HR and HR lean, about lean within HR roles, but also how HR can fully support lean implementation and high value within business. So I'm going to kick off with the first question here, and I will relate back to Eric as well, because as we all know, Eric has got over 200 now, so he's told a podcast, and how that relates back to his leadership. So Catherine, but I'm going to kick off. I did send through some questions. So what's just some of the key things we've picked up? Obviously, a lot's happened over the last 2 years, but what's been some of the key HR trends or activity that you've seen that have just risen to the top over this period?
I looked at your questions and I made some fairly clear notes, but I suppose I was just going to lead off from what Cheryl just said as well. And I love the language you're speaking, because it's the language I speak as well around, the value of people, the employee value proposition as well, I suppose, more than anything. So it's become very clear over the last 2 years that our employees are the lifeblood of our business. And I talk about our because we're all together in this. And I think, some of the things I've written down is to just be mindful that you just can't apply the same rules to every individual. Every individual has different needs and wants. So I think, how to manage employees remotely was one of the big things that came up over the last 2 years. And I suppose if I go back, that was the biggest challenge for a number of businesses. I do retained services with a number of businesses, and some of them were in essential services, so they didn't have too much impact at all. But the other ones had a massive impact. And the massive impact was around managers knowing how to trust their people to do the work. And how do you trust people to do the work? Well, you actually set clear expectations. And some organisations didn't have position descriptions. So we go right back to the basics on things as well. So getting people to understand what their role is and what their expectations are on a daily, weekly basis. And then that's how you build your trust as well. And some managers had a lot of difficulty doing that. So it was around coaching managers on how to do that well. So that was one of the key learnings for me over that period. I think the other thing is about being flexible, and being flexible that people were actually at home managing families as well as homeschooling. And sometimes a little head might just pop up on a webinar or a Zoom, and that's okay because that was allowed to happen during that period of time. And I think that's the kicker into, your next question as well. So, what's happening now, but we'll get to that in a moment. But I think, what else have I got? So I think one of the things was HR became very needed over that period of time because of the people aspect of what they do. So I think it elevate, if we want to call HR a brand within the business, but it did elevate it because everyone was throwing their hands up in the air. Well, everyone generalising, but who knows how to do this stuff? We don't know how to do this. Who's going to help us? So I think HR definitely got to sit at the top table in some organisations where it wasn't sitting before. And hopefully that position's been retained because they should be part of the decision-making in a business as well, and partner clearly with the business. Anyway, I go on a bit, don't I?
That's great. That's fantastic. There's some real key points there. And I'm just checking where Cheryl is now, and I'll ask Cheryl to come in. But I think you've raised, there you go, Cheryl. I think you've raised some pretty key points that I want to explore, and I know Cheryl will as well. So Cheryl, we talked about to manage people remotely, to build trust, being flexible, things happen. And I think we've all had to get really used to that in terms of where we are and the becoming relevant. And I want to explore that a little bit and immerse. So any other particular trends or key things you've seen, Cheryl, which either support that or anything that you want to add?
Do you mean more specific to the COVID situation or just in general?
Yeah, I'm using the last 2 years because that's what comes in.
Actually, some other cool things are happening that I don't think are actually quite related to this. Okay. There's a big trend towards designing employee experiences. I looked up not that long ago current trends in HR titles, and that's becoming a more common title. So I've been learning more about it. At one end of the spectrum, that could be AI artificial intelligence technology. I have a group that I'm having them share their work, who has software that literally, as they onboard people, it monitors what they pick in their responses to the things they read and how they feel about it, and course corrects. It literally improves the onboarding experience through technology on a day-to-day basis. All the way over, I have a couple of examples where people are doing really great work in really doing deep levels of empathy work. Kind of part of, I've actually become much more interested in agile HR, the part of design thinking, but it's becoming more mainstream is how do we design better experiences, and we use partly empathy and design thinking to do it. So it's much more, I think, to the individual and really a much deeper level of how well we meet their needs.
One of the other things that we are seeing is we may have gone down this path. We may not have done it so quickly, because obviously things changed, and there's still some common thinking around about we've had 10 years of change in a year, and there's another 10 to 20 years coming. So things that we were thinking about or wondering how it was going to be done have now happened. So now we're on to the next level. And I think I love the whole idea of the employee experience, because we know Cheryl, within Lean, we've always talked about customer experience and those type of things, and that's now coming out. But I think the relevance part, I always say to people, I'd love in hindsight to have done an exercise with leaders and HR teams or leadership teams three years ago and say, okay, who do you think is your top 10 most valued people that you need in the business? And I'd love to do that list again now, because of the experience you've now been in. Yeah, is how much of that list would have changed. Because I think, Catherine, you said it as well, is about the people understanding. I've now got to make a decision because of isolation or that type of thing. Who do I really need to keep this business going? And I've realized that I need someone to come in and open the door, turn it on, and actually start the computer or take the calls or run the machine. And the whole value perception, I think, has completely changed, which I think is fantastic. I think it's where it should be, which now, Cheryl, then comes back to your point. I then say, okay, now you've got that new list. Now be honest. How well have you really treated some of those people, in terms of development, security, looking after them and those type of things? And I think this has really come out part of it. And what just sits behind it, and I'll come back to you from there then, is about, now we know that, I think one of the things, we have become more connected with our staff because we've now got to know more about them, because we've had to learn about their lifestyles, what their family are, in terms of what their family conditions are and how we need to work with them. And as you, Catherine, said, if I'm in a Zoom call and kids pop up, or we've had grandparents pop up, or cats or dogs pop up, you go, oh, I didn't realize that's what you have to deal with when you're at home. So I think there's a massive connection opportunity that we've got to make use of. Eric, you got your hands up there.
Just if I could throw something into the mix, and this is an enlightening discussion, because I sometimes need to take a step back and realize that when you talk about leadership, you're really talking about the management interactions of human beings, and that's where that HR function is quite critically important. One thing to as a context thing here, and I think it's important, I recently spoke with Jonathan Mamerel from NB Lawyers, who suggested that as part of the HR mix, when you're looking at legal risks in your business, what are your policies, what are your procedures, and are you implementing them in a way that one, has procedural fairness, and two, is about getting to an outcome that is both beneficial to the business as well as being beneficial to the human beings that are involved. And one thing that stands out in this conversation, and I may be reading something into this, so if my guests want to shoot me down, this is the best opportunity to do this, because it's the only way that I'll learn, is when you talk about HR policies and procedures and dealing with a HR function, that'll work in certain size businesses, but as you get smaller, there may not be a HR function, and that HR perspective and the issues you need to keep in mind may reside with a leader that doesn't have an individual who's a specialist in HR. So the lessons that we're talking about here and the issues that are being brought up are quite critical, whether you've got the capacity in your business to have a HR function or if you don't. So I just thought I'd throw that in for context. And if there's any nuance there, please challenge me on it. But that's what I'm seeing at the moment. Again, I bring this from a person who does not have a HR specialty, but is seeing it from a leader sort of macro perspective for what that's worth.
Cheryl, any thoughts on what Eric has just shared there?
Oh, where do I begin? Your first mistake was listening. No, I was kidding. I didn't mean to put it that way. But here's what I know from many years. I'm in the later part of my career. Most legal concerns really come from poor treatment of people. And so if people put, in general, I don't care what size company, and I don't care what the approach to leadership is, if we were just treated people better as people, we'd have less issues and there would be less. The longer I watch, there's a lot of things that HR put in place under some concerns, legal concerns, afraid of this happening, afraid of that happening. And the more we've done that, the more we created the thing we were trying to stop from happening in its own way. We create the community. And I think I've come to a place like many of those policies need to be redrafted and rewritten anyway to be more of the people for the people kind of stuff. Like how do you want to run attendance? How do you all want this to be? And they will create the best attendance policies. So things like point factor systems to make sure everybody's treated identically and it's fair and it's just create, I think, a more parent-child work environment. It doesn't create trust. It doesn't create adult behavior. If you treat people like children, they start to act like children, not because they are children, it's because it's the way you're treating them. And that's not respect. So I've become a bigger fan of let the people guide in the policies. And I don't need to talk to Catherine out of like an HR being in the middle of all that, like they're the keepers of it, has been the kiss of death for that function. It's been like leave it to them to make us do the right thing. Then they'll be the parent of all the children, because they'll make them do the right things or say the right things. And it's just not a value add role. I just think we need to rethink it. What do you think, Catherine?
Thanks, Cheryl. Absolutely agree. You have me at hello. But, I think the thing is, and I do quite a lot of policy work, reviews and handbooks and those sorts of things, which isn't my most exciting pieces of work, but I see it as a great opportunity to really have an impact, and it's an opportunity to really change the landscape. If the employer who's driving that project is open to feedback and open to gathering more information from the employees as well, because you can embed so many things into policy, and they're not just compliance. Compliance is one tick that you need to go through every year and make sure you're just up to date with what the current employment law is. And I'm from an organisation where we have 40 lawyers nationally, so we're a large lawyer-centric, historically organisation, but they have a mixed hybrid skill set. So again, policies, I do a quiz at the end of every policy as well, because number one, it can humanise it a lot more. So I put in, can I turn up to work drunk? Well, no, you can't, But I mean, it's putting it in plain English, those sorts of things, and it makes it a little bit more relevant to the individuals. Well, don't actually like that one sentence, but something like that. But I do work in manufacturing as well. So I do work with people that English isn't their first language also. And I mean, if you're just going to just go and do a template, which we have on our website and all the tools and templates as part of your membership, most of the time I'm tailoring those to a business. They can download them and just put their organisation name in them, but they don't want that, which is great. They want me to tailor it for them and make it meaningful for that actual business. So, what do you call your people? Are they employees or are they team members? Don't just have the standard language. Make sure you make it personalised for that organisation so it's real, and make it a version for review so people can actually review it, provide feedback and make changes. But again, it's an opportunity. I totally agree with Cheryl. Compliance is one very small part of it. It's the opportunity of getting people to understand. And that goes back to what I originally said around expectations as well. And if you've got clear expectations in your onboarding program or induction, whatever you'd like to call it, and it's clear, it's open, it's good dialogue, it's made for the readership, and it's understanding and it's paced. It's not everything overloaded all at once on the first day and right. Do you remember all of that? Great. Off you go. It needs to be measured and it needs to be layered, learning over a couple of months, 6 months, and then it leads into that development review as well. So they're the things that if you do all of that well, I probably don't have much of a job, because, people get what's going on, but there's always human nature that will push the envelope and challenge occasionally, and that's where it keeps us busy as well.
So, Catherine, I think you picked up on a point earlier about the change in this, whether the right term is remote leadership or remote management, yes. Because I think it's something, and I had a conversation with someone, again, this change in technology piece with a fairly large corporate who said, look, one of the big things they've learned is they'd been talking about remote offsite home working for 10 years, all right? And had never got around to doing it. And we talk about the power of change sometimes, the change management, and sometimes you keep talking about the deal with it. And one of the things their CEO is reflecting, and especially around a people engagement, people management point of view as well, what are all the things that we were talking about that we never got around to doing that we've now had to just do because we were all in the occasion where literally at whatever time in March 2020, our worlds were just completely turned upside down in terms of can't travel, can't go into work and everything else. And I think one of the biggest things, and it'd be interesting if it's one of the key challenges, which we're going to move on to now, is is the ability of our leaders and managers to remotely do that well, because I think you may have picked up, Gavin, there were no those clear expectations in the workplace, because I did this by command and control. I did this because I could walk around and talk to people. I could go and have a look at what they're doing. I knew when they were at the desk and not at the desk. I could do all those type of things. So, I think this people value and people change has impacted everybody. We've all been completely tested here. And it's now, what do we think is how we're going to pick it up and deal with it? And I know, Cheryl and I have had a kind of conversation around about this, is about this people engagement, and maybe the leader doesn't know the best is something that I'm still hearing is a bit of an issue within organizations, and people are starting to realize that they do need to engage and interact with their teams in a completely different way, and that can be quite challenging at a leadership point of view. So what have we seen in terms of leadership, in terms of data conversations with leaders? What's some of the key HR type related issues that we're seeing here in terms of lead? Cheryl, so I know you work with some quite large and obviously work around internationally as well. So what's some of the leadership challenges you in your role that you're hearing or dealing with at the moment?
I mean, the first one is just making sure leaders are fully skilled. They'll talk about being stuck at things that just require holding people basically accountable to basic things. And you a lot of times just have shortage of leaders that really know how to do that. They're a bit lost at sea with what are the expectations and how do I have those conversations with people. It's certainly become more clear you need to have a more relational style of leadership. If you treat people poorly, they'll just quit and go down the street and probably get a $2,000 raise while they go down there. So they're more clear. We have to protect, the people. They're fighting hard to get people. They're fighting hard to keep them. So then what can end up happening is then they're not holding them accountable to things because they don't want to upset anybody or, make anybody mad or things like that. So they're struggling with that. They're almost all struggling with how to get enough people in the door. And they're having to accept there just is a limit to how many people they're going to get. So now we're going to have to figure out how will we get along with 80% of the people that we need. So we're just missing a chunk of people. And many of the businesses are all in growth mode because things have shifted what's in demand. So like one of my clients make clippers for animals and men's hair clippers. And so clippers, cutting your own hair for your animals or for yourself, is like just exploded. And so there's just a lot of businesses like that have had huge upticks. And then they're having to deal with a lot fewer people to make all that extra product. So that creates a lot of stress and, people can get worn out. So it goes back to, again, developing communication between people and support. A lot of the supervisors, mid-level leadership, I think just end up just in a pressure cooker of trying to get things done without the right resources. And they're trying for all they're worth. So I've been really encouraging groups to, if you need 10 a day and they can only make 8, change the goal to 8. Setting people up to feel unsuccessful every day isn't good for anybody. And if the circumstances drive a new limitation, then you might as well adjust some things, because you're really going to damage the morale and the self-esteem and just the general energy of a group if you leave them in a mode to fail. And again, they're missing supply chain issues. They've got shortages. They come in every day and try and get work done, and this is wrong, and people are out sick, and we're missing this, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. And so I think need to adjust their sights and support their groups in being successful in a new situation.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point you made. And I think this is why we wanted to have this conversation, because just being the transactional HR in terms of attendance or discipline or that type of thing, it just adds to the boiling pot again in terms of, it's that traditional type of moving. And I want to pick up a point that you said, Cheryl, as well, is I'm not aware of any of my members, and it sounds like the same in the US and whatever, is none of my members are complaining about a low order book. All right. They are completely full, and most of them are in growth mode. So it's just not doing what I've got to do now, and I'm talking to some who've got full order books for 2024, 2025, and it's like 30, 40% growth. And now it's about the realization that maybe I'm not going to get those extra 10 people. Now what do I do? So
that's exactly right.
Yeah, because I can't just bring in people anymore. I don't get 100 people applying. I don't get all that type of thing. So there's this. I suppose we're picking up on a few points earlier. There's a big change around at the minute. Well, maybe I've got to work with the group that I've got now. How can I help them? Really interested in that AI type thinking. How can I help the people I've got now to be better at what they do, help them be more comfortable and be more productive?
I was going to say, and that's about reorganisation of the business. I mean, it's making sure that you're working as smart as you possibly can and applying your lean principles as well, but just sort of like hovering above it and just looking at every possible part of the business to make sure that it is as efficient as possible and making sure you've got those skills. And if you haven't, who's got the ability to learn them, number one, and how quickly can they get up to speed? Because if you have people there that can't move forward with you, then it's about making sure that they have the skills to move forward with you, or potentially they're not suited to that new business model. And then it's about finding the right people for those roles as well. But I mean, this is about succession planning as well, but it's also about making sure you've got a forward plan that's flexible enough to move with COVID and the like, because that diversified some businesses. It totally made them do a flip into something completely different in some circumstances as well. But I think, moving back to when we were talking about the impacts of COVID as well, and also what we're dealing with now, I'm also finding a group of, or a cohort of members that are relieved somewhat and want to go back to the way they were. and I have this challenge about going, well, why would you go back to where you were? You've made all these great inroads into all these other areas, but they don't want people to be working from home. They want them. And I did a webinar about this about 2 months ago, the big return. We talked about all the bigs, and this was on the big returns. And it's about helping employers understand the benefits of a hybrid work model as well. And the research that I did, and you can correct me here, Cheryl, but it roughly worked out to be about 30% of people wanted to stay at home permanently and not come to work. About 30% wanted to actually be in the office, fixed, don't work at home. And about 60% are quite happy with a hybrid mix. And that's from a lot of the research I got from Harvard Business Review, mainly. And I think that when I talked to them about those stats, they thought, oh, well, it's not the end of the world. Maybe if I just give them a day here and a day there. But it still doesn't take from the fact that they need to learn those skills to actually manage people remotely. Again, we're back to that. But thinking differently, it's about helping them stay in that mindset of growth mindset as opposed to that fixed mindset of where they were before. I can go back to my comfort zone of I can physically see someone working, so they're working. But we all know there's presenteeism. They turn up, but they don't work. So there's all of that we're contending with. Cheryl?
Actually, one of the things I was going to mention is I think, Kevin, it's still along the same lines when you mention being in a growth mode and realizing we're not going to get those extra people, and you come to terms with that. I've been seeing organizations just adopt new behaviors they wouldn't have. An example is there was a plant, and they always said everybody had the same schedule. This was the hours we work. So then they started changing schedules. They started to have some people work 8-hour shifts, some people work 12-hour shifts, and they created variation. And they started to make a lot more room for more people to come in the door. And they had always been in the paradigm, so to speak. Well, everybody has to work the same schedule. Nothing else would work. Why would you want that production line working one way and this doing another? But they needed more people. And so it's like getting into new ways of thinking. Like, where do we get ourselves stuck in limits that are in mostly our mind? And they thought, we'll try it. We just experiment, just try it out. And it worked great. And they have some of the best attendance in the entire company because they've got schedules that work better. They also shifted the time, and they made some of this stuff more family friendly. A family friendly policy, working 12-hour days doesn't work for many people with children. They can't get childcare to cover a 12-hour day. So it's not whether they can work, it's like they can't get the childcare. So they got in a whole bunch of people that would work a shorter day. So I think some of it is, well, if those things won't change, the growth and the people, what could change?
Yeah, that's that internal perspective. I think that's, and this is where, and we've got a session coming up in August, which is that great reason. You've got to take it on board now. You are where you are. We stop looking back. There's things you can learn, but everyone now wants to go, well, if this is where I am, I've got to reset what I do, what I think. There's some things you won't change because it's the nature of maybe your products or your processes, but everything's on the table now. Everything's on the table. And I want to come back to the point because, and I know this is a passion for both of you, but typically that's not, most leadership teams would say, right, we've got to reset, we've got to do everything else. I don't think they would normally call in an HR team to be part of that discussion because you're just there in terms of attendance and sickness and I need 10 new people, go and find them for me. Are you still coming across that, or do you think that traditional way of working now has passed? I'm just really interested about, are we still got a lot of business that's almost got the head in the sand going, no, I just keep doing it? Or do you think we've unleashed it now?
I think, how it starts, it might start with, we just can't get people. So it'll present itself as something completely different. But when you dig deeper, it'll come back to, right, so let's look at your recruitment practices. Let's look at your advertising. Let's look at how you actually widen the net. Let's also look at why you're actually recruiting this role, first of all. So every role that becomes available is an opportunity to reevaluate whether you need it and or what skills you're going to get that are the value adds to take you into the future as well. So it's a really big piece of work if you want it to be, rather than go bums on seats, or excuse my language, but one person replaces another person, same skills. It just doesn't work that way every time. It's like when you do you're planning for the future and you say to all your managers, right, okay, so let's talk succession. Who can do your role? Oh, well, I don't have anyone. How does that happen? So it's always thinking about who's going to, accrual leaves. I've got a big problem with my leave accruals. There's so much leave accrued for long service leave. I've got great tenure, but no one ever takes leave. Okay, what's the reason? Well, they feel that there's no one can do their job and they go on leave. Okay, so let's start talking about, you do need to take leave, you need to manage to leave, you need to forecast that leave, but what you also need to do as a manager is plan how to take that leave and who's going to step up while you're away. So all those things, they're always systemic of something else. So it'll present itself with a basic thing like, well, I need to get rid of this person, but it's not really I need to get rid of this person. You just don't have a performance management tool and you haven't been managing that person very well at all and given them any opportunity to turn themselves around or retrain. They're just sick of it and they've never documented it. And they're 6 months into it and they're just like, I'm over it. They've got to go. But it's always dig deep and find the root cause, and let's unpack it. So
I think that's great. You've got the challenge, the whole challenge each and every role. And I've also got the point I've picked up on, and then I'll come back to Cheryl, is these are also development opportunities. So it could be a development, and that's part of that value stream that Cheryl, the value stream about people is giving it as an opportunity. And I'm just going back to Eric here, is I think you've had some discussion, especially around some of the sports people and military and that type of thing, where the thinking is about stepping up into a role is a development opportunity. It's a learning opportunity. Yeah. Therefore, the person may not be quite ready yet, but are they ever going to be ready if they never have to have the role completely? Eric, am I right? You've come across some of those discussions?
Yeah, particularly in the military context. Now, again, it's a military context for a reason, but the big learning I took out of that was they train their people to do the job above them or a few levels above them. That way you've got flexibility. If the proverbial hits the fan, then you've got people that can move up or down, knowing that they've been trained for those positions. Now, the reality in the workplace is some workplaces won't be able to do that, but a culture that fosters opportunities to do the things that you're talking about is something that I'm seeing a little bit more. One of the issues that I don't think has been brought up, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that in the HR space that I've seen is dealing with mental health issues and issues that have come from the last couple of years. Now, I know in talking to you offline, Kevin, and others around, well, it's not about looking back. There are going to be longer term consequences from what COVID has done to workplaces, and people are willing to talk about right now. And one of those is the mental health impact, not just on your staff. And I think Cheryl alluded to this before. It's about the people managing those staff. If I'm correct in my assumption here that some leaders have been caught out, potentially not seeing the world of work as it actually is and pretending things have gone along a certain way, the impact of what COVID's done is brought those things to light. And I think some people are under enormous amounts of pressure, and maybe a function into the future of HR is to identify when you've got some stressed leaders in the organization, because if at the top your leaders aren't functioning at their best, that's going to have consequences on the people that they deal with. So that's what's been coming out. And I hope I've answered your question, Kevin. I see it in my industry. So I work in the commercial fishery space, and I've seen business owners and business leaders under enormous amounts of stress, not just the daily stuff that you get in the business, but what COVID's done is it's made people ask some questions. And to finish this point, Kevin, and I think it's one you've been alluding to, is leaders that don't have good self-reflective practice and seek feedback are not going to learn from any of this. And I think all leaders do that to a degree. I've met a few of my travels that don't do that at all, but being self-reflective is one element, is being able to seek feedback on that is the other critical one. So that's what I'm hearing at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, those are good ones. I certainly agree. I would say what I've come up with in the last couple of years that has been working well is creating a pathway to infuse HR skills into the leadership teams. I always knew over the years that actually HR as a workaround, like if we have leaders with poor people skills, they don't listen that well, have HR people be like one of them per 1,000 people is like not going to work. And people really need their leader too. So it's been infusing that. But in that process, we really had leaders together over long periods of time talking together. And when they were together practicing skills, what it has really shown me is how much support they could get from each other. They can work around each other every day and not actually really access support. And when they sit down and we do peer coaching practice, it was intended initially to work on their coaching skills. But what really partly happened is they found each other in whole new ways, and they shared what hurts, and they shared where they feel embarrassed or what they're unsure about. And then they all found out like, oh, we're all having the same experience. We're all not feeling like we're able to do what we think we're supposed to be able to do. And from there, they've had a lift in their spirit and how they can show up. So I think fundamentally one thing organizations could do is have more ways their leaders connect and in some level of vulnerability and really talk about what's happening and share their problems. And they don't need to give each other advice. They mostly just need to listen to each other and show up. And when they don't feel so alone, they're better leaders. I think this idea that we just keep saying leaders should do this, like they're human beings and they're not a limitless like vat of like things to pull from. We have to give them more to get more from them. And so I think a lot of them are just terribly under supported. And the only way to really solve for that is really each other and create a much stronger community support. So we've done that by just almost like a regular monthly session, and they talk. It's so easy. It's free. The magic happens between them. It doesn't require somebody to give it to them. I'd really like to see HR transfer its skills into leadership and do things that only someone outside of that business, either do that or put their time and energy in building those skills.
That's great. So Catherine, just coming back, I know because you're from a membership point of view, are there any other, before we go into the last 10 minutes of this great discussion, because I'm just looking at the time and how quickly it's gone already. So Catherine, is there any other key challenges or trends or issues that are coming out from that we haven't discussed at the moment?
I'm glad that Eric raised mental health, and I think that's been quite prevalent without a doubt. I think mental health first aid training, which is a fairly new thing, I suppose, here in Australia. Although people think it's new, it's been around for a while. But I attended that course, and it was very heavy but comprehensive, and it's good to have a couple of people in the workplace definitely do that as go-tos, because it's not necessarily a person in leadership that does it. People usually put their hand up because there's, it's quite personal to them, maybe in their family or friends or whatever. So they feel quite passionate about it. That's helpful. The other part to it, also another completely different topic, is diversity and inclusion. And I think because of the talent market being tight for some roles, obviously, and candidates being quite prescriptive because they can. I think it's about making sure that when you are recruiting, you widen your net to diversify your workforce. But how are you going to do that inclusion when you bring them on board? You need to think of the full picture. So it's not just about making a diverse workplace, it's about making sure that has that whole piece of inclusion attached to it as well. So that onboarding and the employees that have, always been quite static with their, Anglo-Saxon or whatever it is in their workplace. Now you're diversifying. How is that going to be embraced across the board as well, including, all sorts of cultures and backgrounds as well, different holiday practices and all those sorts of things.
You're going back to job descriptions and I love the whole people connection piece, which I think is we've got to know, we have to know more and learn more and have those direct relationships. The way we then bring people in. So what's the impact been on the way we write job adverts or job descriptions? Because they can be very cold and I need a degree in this or an expert in this. So do we see a shift in the way that, bit like you said, Catherine, and I'll go to Cheryl first, in the way that we try to attract people? Is it more about their behaviors and more about how their social skills? And is it now less about the technical skills? So can I just ask Cheryl in terms of what you're seeing, and I'll come to you, Catherine. So is there something we need to be doing more there, and what part do we play in that?
I mean, I think one of it is, I think the term Catherine used was value propositions. So, I could work at this plant, or this employer, or this employer. So what would make me happier here? How would I feel happier? Is it a better place to belong? So what I've helped teams understand is if they can't articulate why they would, I'll say to them, if you were sitting in a bar talking to the guy next to you, how would you explain to him why they'd want to come work here? Obviously, it's not skills. It's like, what's it like to be here? What are we like together? Do people fight all the time? Are we kind of mean to each other? No, this is a really fun place. We have a softball league and we do stuff together and we have fun. I had one guy kind of sheepishly go like, well, we have fun. I'm like, fun sells. That's the kind of value proposition. They want to work where it's fun. They want to work where people have a sense of belonging or enjoy their time with each other there. And those things now, again, people have choices. They won't stay working places they don't have to because they're not stuck. So we need to create places they want to work. So I think it's helping the team, like even as they interview and certainly in the ad being more clear. But I think more of it's when they start to engage with the person, creating an experience that the person is going to be like, I'd like to be part of this team. I mean, community and teamwork is always one of the big pieces that is always got to be part of that mix a lot of the time. The career leveling, making sure there's a path for people. They want to know they can come in here and build skills. There'll be a plan for me and I'll go somewhere. And over time, those kinds of things. But making sure they can articulate that and make that value proposition clear.
Sorry, Kevin, just an observation. I just recently recorded a podcast with a demographer, social researcher who talked about the latest census data in Australia. And because of, obviously it's a leadership podcast that we're all participating in, I thought I would bring this in. He suggested to me quite strongly that younger generations coming through when they're talking about the world of work want meaningful work, want to know that they're going to be valued and that that the values that they want are reflected in the organizations that they're looking for. And so the idea about just focusing on technical skills, as you suggested, Kevin, may be a thing of the past, but get on to Seek right now. In most job categories, there are still old school ways of recruiting. And I think what candidates are tending to do, and I have a couple of friends at the moment who are looking for jobs, they will call and ask about the position and certain elements that may not be talked about in the position description. So that world, I think, will change over time. And if you can agree that maybe it's not just a great resignation, it might be a great opportunity for businesses to do some things. I think that's the kind of thing that I've been hearing here so far. So, sorry for the interjection, Kevin.
I think it's great. I was going to give one example, then I'll come to Catherine, and then we're going to go into the last 5 minutes. But I was talking to a gentleman in a member walking around, and he was contract labor hire. And I was just interested, well, what's it been like for you? And he said, it's really interesting. So prior to 2-3 years ago, he was contract labor hire. He would just wait for that first call. I've got a job for you tomorrow. He would just snatch at it. All right. He would just snatch, go and work. and almost, as he would say, live by the consequences of that. He's now in a position where at 6 p.m. the night before, he gets 6 offers, right, for contract work the following day. He will take time out to look at the company. There is some, where is it? How far have I got to travel? That type of thing. But he said he would sit there for a little while and go, well, actually, I actually know that company and I know what their culture is like. Or, oh, hang on a minute, a friend of mine worked there last week and said, never go back there, you know? So you're at the point where even someone in contract labor, and he says that I need to work, you know, I really need to work, is taking that time out to do some research before accepting a day's work. It's a real interesting dynamic. And the more I thought of it, I thought, wow, that's just quite scary in the terms of, and I don't think businesses get that, or there are not as many are getting it, and I think that's what I'm hearing as well. So, all right, I want to just go through, because we've got 5 minutes left. So, what I want from Cheryl and from Catherine and a little bit of Erica as well, we know we get the point. So, if we've got a group of listeners here that have listened to this from there, I'm after 3 top tips, recommendations. If you were saying now, I'm sitting here, what do you think we now should be doing from an HR perspective? And then right at the very end, we like to do one key takeaway from the discussion. So is anybody, so what top 3 tips from an HR perspective you're going to give back to the listeners and the organizations here? Who would like to go first?
I think ask more questions of your people and listen. So that's 2. Ask, listen, and think differently. So, you know, think differently about your responses as well. Think outside of the box and really, really listen, because the answers are there. Your people can tell you what you need to know, and they're very valuable because they stay for a reason. As Cheryl said, they stay for a reason, and it's what's in it for them. If it's what's in it for them from a candidate perspective, then ask them what they want. They won't have a whole shopping list of things there. It'll really be about realistically what they need in their life and in their job at that point. Don't make assumptions.
I think you pick up, they stay for a reason, but they also go for a reason as well, which is the other one that we need to pick up on. Cheryl, what would be just some of your top tips?
My first one actually has really come out of more the last few years of looking at how individuals, what they need and what makes them happy. So recently I was asked, what's one thing everybody could do in our organization that would make this a better company? And I said, basically, find one way to make your work role fit you better. Find one way that you would enjoy your job a little more. I think if people could find more ways to get their work, create more joy for them or be a better fit, that really is going to be partly the path forward. So I think it's going to be find ways for your people to be able to do their jobs and enjoy it a little more in whatever way they do it and how they do it and whatever choices that can be made. The second thing I think is definitely involve your people more in the solutions. I continue to see, especially when the going's tough, leaders feel like we'll solve it. Somehow we're smarter. That's why they put us in leadership jobs. So I think it's engage more of your team, even in the recruiting effort. Bring more people in, get more people involved. More people contribute ideas and thoughts to whatever the people, especially the people problems are that you're facing. And the third I would put is experiment. One of the things that happens anywhere near people changes is like, well, if we do this, we'll have to do this forever and 10 other things and the problems that could happen. I'm like, just try it. Try it for a day. See what happens. Try it for a week and see if anything breaks. And if nothing breaks, do it another week and just do some things and try some things. And so just try experimenting rather than wholesale changes.
Yep. Fantastic. Eric, let's go to you. What's your key takeaway? I'll let Cheryl and Catherine think about what's one key message or takeaway from this discussion, this great discussion.
I might do this in 2 parts. Something I'm drawing from both our guests today. So firstly, in no particular order of importance, I think it's when you talk about what do you need in a leadership toolkit, I think this understanding of what HR means and what your people means is a whole new different frontier in certain stratas of leadership. I'm not saying this, that in every organization, every leader has to be 100% across the HR function, but definitely the thinking around what best practice HR looks like going into the future is something I think is a valuable addition to any leader's toolkit. That would be my first takeaway from this. And the second one is about understanding the culture of the organization that you're in, and what does it mean for the people around you being there? What does it mean for them? And then by extension, if you were going to sell the benefits of working in your business, what would you say that isn't about the money that you're going to get or the technical expertise that you need to do the role? And I think that might flip on its head how you recruit the right people. And maybe a third one, and this was, Cheryl brought this up, maybe you get more people involved in the business in recruiting the people coming in. And if you're wanting high performing teams, organizations, taking growth opportunities, all of that good stuff, you need to have a good foundation, and that foundation is your people. So that would be my takeaway from today, mate.
That's some good ones there. So thank you very much. Catherine, what's just one thing that's resonating with you from this discussion?
I suppose more than anything, it'd have to be to do with just making sure that organisations, I can only resonate with what Eric and Cheryl have said already, and yourself, Kevin, that buy-in, having buy-in right from a cross-section of people in your business around decision-making or collaboration more so than anything, involving, people at different levels of the organisation as well. As Cheryl said also, just because you're in leadership doesn't necessarily, I don't think you said this, but anyway, just because you're in leadership doesn't necessarily mean you're the only person that's a decision maker. Having people that are at, on the lines and those sorts of things have got invaluable information to share because they're in the roles every day. So learning from the people around you can help you build an organisation that works for everyone.
Fantastic. Cheryl?
Yeah. First of all, this word presenteeism. Does I pronounce it right? Presenteeism. I'm taking that. I love that word. That's a great word. Never heard that word.
Nobody's home.
Yeah, I love that word. So that's one takeaway. And two, I think just in this discussion is it's a new day, and we're going to continue to see how things evolve. I think what's exciting is things are going to need to change. So what happens when things need to change is they generally do. We find new answers to situations. Something about human nature finds its path. So some things will probably come out of this. And my guess, hopefully some of them will be really good.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think for me, I think you've picked up on the takeaway, that the employee experience, the engagement. We do some great stuff in people and lean and in continuous improvement. We've just got to start applying it back internally and on ourselves. And I think adding the HR to the leadership, I think it isn't just a side bolt on anymore. It's a key ingredient of being a good leader and including a great business. So, all right, well, we're going to bring that. What a fascinating discussion, change your role of HR. And we'd be really keen when we publish this podcast to obviously get all your feedback. Can I put a big thank you to Catherine from AI Group? It's been great to have you involved, and we look forward to having you more involved as we come across these discussions as well. And you've now completed your first podcast. So congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you, everyone.
No problem. And Cheryl, great to, and thank you, because I know it's evening last night for you from there. Really looking forward to catching up in October as the study tour and Dallas as well. And Cheryl is a published author as well and got some great books on lean HR and does some great things. So Cheryl, thank you very much. Greatly appreciated.
Good to meet you. Good to meet you, Eric. I'll look forward to hearing from you. Catherine, really enjoyed meeting you. And I love that word. So that now it's been in my vocabulary.
Okay. There you go. That's fantastic. And Eric, it's been a pleasure as always. And I hope this just really builds on the dynamic conversation we're having across these different topics.
Yeah, thank you for the invite. And thanks for your time, guys. This was great.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. I'm going to bring this Best Practice Network Talking Leadership podcast to a close. Please look out for our other series. And if you want to get involved in one of these, just give us a call. Thanks so much, everybody.